and pleased to welcome Paul Ingham from the NHSBSA. And I won't steal any thunder, but Paul's one of our leads in the software skills network that I mentioned earlier as well. I've known him for quite a while. So Paul, welcome.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks a lot for Jamie for showing us the Power Automate stuff. It was really good, wasn't it? Showing us some working examples, and Nina going through the Power Automate desktop stuff as well. I've got joined on the call as well, Dan Webster, who's also been part of the pensions finance operations team, and we've been part of a RPA workflow testing to see if we can, adapt a legacy process to use RPA. So the solutions that we've heard so far have been around using Power Automate Desktop and Power Automate Cloud. So this one's about using a corporate solution called Prism. So what I'll do is I'll get the slides up and we'll start the show. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'll just minimize that. My name is Paul Ingham. I've worked in the finance systems, worked in the NHSBSA since 2014. I joined as a finance business analyst and I worked within the pensions area and within the finance shared services area as well. In 2021, I got the role of finance systems and improvement manager. And since then, I've been working within a lot of the finance systems applications about the ERP system that I have, the back processing, etc., etc. I'll just hand you over to Dan.
Yeah, so I'm Daniel Webster. I've worked in the NHSBSA since 2012. I joined finance in 2017, initially on the accounts receivable team, and I took over management of the pension employer accounts team in 2022. So I've been there just over 2 years now.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Dan's been involved in the sort of process post implementation, so he's got some good examples of what we've experienced since we've gone live with it as well. So in order for us to have problem, we needed a problem. So like I mentioned, it was a legacy process, it was a debt recovery process, and it was originally a low volume process, and it's become increasingly inefficient because there's actually legislative changes, and it caused a number of invoices to be increased from a few per month to over 100 per month. The process itself is quite heavily manual and it was paper based, and it relied on complex calculations. The system that we were working from, it had limited development capabilities and options, and that sort of hindered the possibility of us implementing a more efficient improvement within the system. So consequently, the invoicing process, it became labour intensive, it was error prone, it required significant manual effort and input to put the invoices into the system, and then we had to manually match them. And at that point, I think we paused them and went to emailing them. So it just created a very complex, convoluted process. So we thought there was an opportunity there to work within our different areas. So we had a special RPA team that's been set up within the NHSBSA, and we collaborated with them in the pension service area that we were working with to see if we could address them challenges using Robotic Process Automation as a solution. So a lot of the stuff that sort of Nina's been showing is really good to see the process maps being used, and that was sort of the approach that we took. We actually wanted to see what the as-is process looked like and see what opportunities there were for us to sort of evolve that process into a more automated RPA solution. So just handing you over to the as-is process. I don't know, Dan, if you want to just go through the original process that we had in place.
Yeah, so the original process was very convoluted. This was a process that was in place when I took over the team in 2022. So as you can see from the slide initially, the finance assistant on the team would receive a notification email, and then I think to be honest, Paul, I think that's possibly the wrong order on there, because initially they would register the invoice on the system and input the data, and then once every single invoice has been manually entered, then the print is a batch job and every invoice has to be then manually split into the PDF and then sent as a registered invoice and letter by email or by letter to the employers, which, as you can imagine, if it's a manual process for every single invoice, took up a significant amount of people hours.
Excellent. Yeah, that's true. And you was also having to collect them emails, send the emails manually to the employer as well. So it was taking around 15 minutes per invoice overall to actually produce it, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so when we think about, sorry, Paul, I was just going to say, when we think about 100 invoices at 15 minutes, it's a lot of time, especially with the changes to the regulations and legislation that we've had to work with, which meant that the amount of invoices increased.
I think that's true, yeah. So from that process, you can see there's a lot of accounting activity there where they're having to do a lot of repetitive, monotonous what I would call boring work, really having to do something. And then there's also the risk of dragging the wrong debtor letter into the wrong email and stuff like that. So it was just prone to sort of like errors. And with the increase of volume, it just wasn't a practical solution anymore, was it, Dan?
No, not at all.
Okay, so what we did is we worked with the RPA team and we explored the different solutions that were available. So we did look at Power Automate Cloud as a solution, but again, for the development opportunity and the way we could get the information from the whole system, the Blue Prism solution really stood out as an option for us to sort of go down. So we actually chunked up the processes into steps and then started to see how we could use RPA to sort of fulfill them obligations. So you consider to be process, it's been re-engineered. So we decided that the RPA would actually automatically receive the outputs and it would be able to split and organise them to be sent to the debtor. We also identified the RPA team as typical. I've just got the postman knocking at the door. Just bear with me a moment, please.
That was always going to happen during this presentation.
Thanks for joining us, Dan. Sorry I didn't get you on the agenda, but really good to meet you.
No, it's all right. It's a pleasure. It's my first time attending these events, so it's been a good listen so far. Just so whilst we've got a bit of time, I thought Nina's presentation very useful, very good information in there.
Fantastic. He's back.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, right. So yeah, so where did we get to? So the RPA. So we decided the RPA would email the invoices directly to the debtor with a calculation, a breakdown, and that the RPA system would also generate an import file. So rather than the accountant keying in the data anymore, all they have to do now is get an output file from the RPA system and upload that directly into our accounting system. Now, what they did there is they'd obviously validate it. Pardon me, I'm out of breath now. Let me get some breath. Accounting system. So yeah, so they need to have the data rekeyed. So they didn't have to rekey the data into the system. They got an output file that they could import into the system, and they'd validate that before committing it to the ledgers. So the next page. Okay, so once we'd implemented, well, before we did that, we actually took some measures. So as Dan's mentioned, we got 15 minutes per process, but with the RPA solution, that reduced it to under an hour processing time. Okay, so the benefits, I don't know if you want to go through them, Dan.
Yeah, so the benefits, as we mentioned there before, RPA touched on it earlier, each invoice took 50 minutes to process. So this added up combined to taking about 25 hours per month. And to be honest, when the legislation changed regarding the invoices we raise in particular, it meant a lot more work from the NHS pension side of things. Therefore, that 25 hours actually increased to about 35, 40 hours per month. And it meant less time to actually chase the difficult debts or do debt reconciliations with the organisations to try and work out exactly what was owed. But once we'd launched RPA into this area of the business, the entire batch of invoices can now be processed in less than an hour. So on a good month, that would be another 40 hours to be able to chase debt, to be able to contact the organisations directly. So it's had a major impact on our recovery efforts as well.
Yeah, so you can see from afterwards, the RPA only takes like under an hour for them to process that in the background. And because it is the Blue Prism solution, it is actually unattended as well. So there's naturally, they can set it off in the evening when they get it and then come back in the morning. They can see the file ready to be imported into the system and their emails can get sent out to the employers. Okay, so a bit of the lessons learned. So I think we've already heard a bit of theming really around standardising the data and having your processes clearly mapped out. It's really important, so you can understand the steps that take to complete the process, identify where there's business rules or complexities within it that allows you not to be able to automate the solution. It's got to be tested, like Nina mentioned there. You've got to do some full functional system testing, user acceptance testing. And like I think what Nina was sort of saying there, getting in front of the user, you've got to have that confidence level. So sometimes you do find you do a lot more functional system tests to make sure when it goes in front of the user, you're not dampening the confidence by it not working straight away. So you've got to really build that example up and show the end user that it really works. And obviously there's a maintenance aspect to the solution. So we did partner with the RPA team, and they are sort of managing the sort of RPA automation in the background. And it's important that you've got them connections to sort of maintain a solution because things can change from the whole system. You might have to change the letter template or different things like that. So it's important to have them sort of change mechanisms and change controls in place just so you can counter all that stuff.
Yeah, I think, Paul, if you don't mind me just
Oh yeah, go on.
coming in there, I think there's just been a really good point made in the chat about considering the items for RPA, fully assess the full functionality. I just wanted to add, fully agree with that as well. So it is important to analyze what we've got within our current systems, and thankfully we've got our finance system, Paul, standardized across the business as well. So it means that RPA can sort of slot into that once we've standardized everything, as you've already alluded to there.
Excellent. Okay, yeah. No, is there any more questions in the chat, Dan, or is that everything?
No, I think that's it for now.
Okay, cool. Okay. So like the sort of lessons we learned, so going forward, sort of enabling RPA in a business, and again, very, very similar to as what Nina was saying there around the standardization of input data, digitization of documents where you can, so RPA can consume that. You need to have process mapping, detailed process mapping, understanding the steps, again, so you can understand where you need to go from and where you need to go to. System integration, so it's choosing the right solution. Like we're using Blue Prism in this instance, but you could use Power Automate Desktop, or you could use Power Automate Cloud if you want to sort of be a more citizen developer. And then Blue Prism's it's more complex, and you sort of do need a team to stand that up and work it. Employee training, so it's getting the people's buy-in and making sure that they're all fair with the new process, putting proper documentation in place and working with the end users to make sure it works. Like we've got Claire on the call today as well, who's joined us, and she actually does the process itself. So, and in the questions or anything like that, if there's any questions in specific that you want around from a user focus, just ask them in the chat and we'll be able to get Claire to interject on that one. I've just mentioned business buy-in. It's really important that you get that buy-in. Like Dan said, we're struggling to keep on top of the work at the time. So putting that RPA solution in place has enabled us to chase the debt, work through the reconciliations, and just be more efficient at collecting it and working with our customers. Exceptions management, error trapping was mentioned by Nina. It's very important. You automate a process, you don't see the process, so you really have to have that visibility of where things go wrong. So you need to step through that process, find out where things are falling down, and making sure that you've got something to capture that and sort of report it out, so then people can take action on the back of that. Just like humans, robots will make mistakes, and it's just a case of being able to identify them, just as we do as humans. We put in checks for our work that we do. I think we've got to be very thoughtful and do that for robot process automation as well. And again, change management, you can't change everything, like we'd love to automate all the processes that we do, but that's just not practically possible, and not all processes are suitable for automation. So it's just really making sure that you're identifying the right places to sort of target your automation activities on, look for quick wins, low hanging fruit, and then sort of build up and expand your maturity from there. Okay, so that's really the presentation for today. If anyone's got any questions or anything, it'd be really helpful to sort of we'll answer them if we can.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we've got a couple in the chat. If anyone wants to put up their hands, that'd be great. We have a bit more of a discussion. So Sean's got a question in about essentially Blue Prism itself. So generally regarded as an expensive barrier to market, use of bot time. Did you experience this?
Because we had that funding mechanism in place, and the RPA team had been put in there to sort of look at using Blue Prism as a solution, what we really had to do was build up a business case, and find out where the value and efficiencies are. Like as Dan mentioned, the process that we were looking at was taking 15 minutes. It was convoluted. We had no opportunity to sort of change the whole system to get a better detail and better outputs from that system. So it sort of drove its way to Blue Prism solution. So we had a few examples that we talked through with the RPA team, and this was identified as one of the ones that could be done. There's a couple more that we want to do, but I accept that Blue Prism is a corporate enterprise solution, and you've got to have the business investment and obviously the team to sort of run it behind the scenes. What we've seen today is a good example of Power Automate Desktop, where we can use that in. Like I know people say it's attended, but I've used Power Automate Desktop, and I can actually run the browser bit of it in the background, and I can read my emails, reply to emails, and I can also update Excel in the background as well. So whilst they say it's attended, I think it's a bit misleading. I think when you say attended, it means you've got to have a PC switched on, and you've got to physically trigger that process off. Most of them you can run in the background. Now, when it requires you to actually interface with the front end, i.e. key data in, there's different ways you can put Power Automate Desktop, for example. You can have it so it does it in the background, or you can have it so it does it in the foreground. If you have it in the background, that means you can continue to use other applications while it runs in the background. But the environment's very, very important, and the configuration. But yeah, Blue Prism, you do have to have a business case to really start using it, except that it's not everybody's going to get access to that.
Is there an argument for a slave PC, sort of, office allocated to run desktop?
You might get red flags from the RT, because when that happens, if you log onto two PCs, you're effectively leaving one unsecured and unattended, if you will. Unless you have them next to each other, I suppose that's the practical way of doing it. You could have a desktop or two laptops, and you can log into each one. And also, I think some accounting systems might not allow you to log into the application twice as well. It'll stop you from logging into two sessions.
So whether there's a virtual member of the finance team that exists in parallel, almost, then you've got an accountability of, it sounds like there's ways to, not have entirely attended work.
Yeah, I was just thinking, with Power Automate Desktop, you can get an unattended version. It's just that's where you start paying for it. So again, like what Nina's shown us today, some business justification to maybe develop that and see if they can get an unattended solution and pay for that. So I think Jamie showed it earlier on. There were two columns. One said like your Power Cloud apps, and then there's another tab that said your Power Automate Desktop ones. Well, what you can do is you can get a premium license for your desktop version, which allows you to run that unattended in the cloud. And that's when you'll start seeing your floors when you're a premium there, and you can run them unattended within a sort of like desktop environment. It's a bit more complex. And again, it's environment configuration. It's not everyone's cup of tea. It's, I'd start slow. I'd look at Power Automate Desktop free and see what you can do with an attended solution, and then maybe Power Automate Cloud if you want to do an unattended solution. Make use of the free stuff, and then identify where you need the premium features, so you can build up a business justification and business case to get it. So it's not that expensive. It's just not out of the box solution that we get. You just got to have a business case, I think.
So it sort of links to George's question, but is there sort of your role in this? You've sort of got the RPA central team that exists obviously within the organization, and then you obviously have the people that it is happening to and their processes, right? And you guys seem to feature, or at least, am I right in saying that you're essentially the liaison between these two entities to be able to facilitate a, let's say, smooth transition? Is that?
I don't know Dan, how's it work for you, working with the different areas and stuff?
Yeah, so essentially when we brought in RPA, the RPA team, you're absolutely right, Richard. The RPA team deal with Blue Prism. I think that was one of the questions Ben had in the chat there. The RPA team completely handle the side with Blue Prism. Yeah. I've not had any direct involvement with Blue Prism, so I couldn't really feed back on that. But just to touch back on what George has asked about influencing others who previously do the manual tasks, the key important thing is to show them the positives and the alternative work that they could be doing in that time. Yeah. There's additional time now for their own career, their own development as well. It's given, the time saved, it's given the opportunity for people to have a look at other areas of the business as well. The time saving, it's allowed them to focus on dealing with the difficult debt. And ultimately, as a recovery team that's trying to recover payments back into the NHS, the proof is in the results. It's in the reduction of our balances that are owed to us by other organisations, shows that the time is being used more effectively now.
And because of the nature of it, there's obviously quite a lot of, let's say, time working out the kinks, sort of, trial and error, going through that, tempering the patience of people's processes and going back and going, this isn't going to, you must have done quite a lot of like people management and expectation management in that, because we've heard a lot about RPA implementations in other organizations, let's say at scale, that have ultimately failed. And the observations are myriad on why that is, but some of them have been the lack of patience from, say, the leadership of procuring such an expensive system and then not waiting enough time to be able to get these processes embedded and fixed. Have you
Yeah, I think one of the things from that is, I think when you're improving a process, it always takes a bit of time, in my opinion, for the real results of what you're doing. The time saved in 1 month, you might not actually see the true benefit of that till say 6 months down the line when it's accumulated, and then you start realizing, well, actually a colleague's spending much more time being able to deal with this particular difficult data than they are just continually printing out invoices. So you're absolutely right about needing patience from both colleagues that are dealing with it and also the leadership team, your senior manager as well. You need you need them to be patient. And I think key thing about any new process is being realistic with your time skills that you're giving as well. But thankfully, the team I inherited, they were all up for change. So there was no real they're always coming to me with new ideas. Where can we look at and implement RPA and other areas as well? So that's something we'll start looking at, in the future as well.
That's really good.
Just thinking about the service side of things as well, the limited development that we had on the system that was generating this calculation and the amount of information it used, it just wasn't practical for them to invest and build an application that could fit the increased volume and demand it needed. It literally were a couple of months, and it just went from a couple to 100, and that sustained, and it just was too impractical for us to carry on with that convoluted manual process as well. So it was really, it's getting the buy-in from the source system as well, I think, as well as the staff that are doing the job.
So what's really interesting is we did a bit of research to find out that actually there's about 70, 80 trusts across the country that all have Blue Prism somewhere in their organisation, but the awareness of that, particularly in finance, was very low, but obviously the opportunity is significant. So what would you say to those that are aware that they have Blue Prism and probably have processes that could be in mind? What's the route of approach that you'd suggest to them?
I think if they've got Blue Prism, it's highly likely they'll have a robot process automation team, and it's really engaging with them, and just maybe yourself having to think about some of the processes that you've got that are repetitive, that you're getting them from source systems where you're having to manually do a lot of work on that piece of work. Is there an opportunity for you to use Blue Prism and sort of approach that team and then go through some of the use cases? So I think what we did, we presented a number of different processes that we thought could be useful for our automation, and went through a triage process and identified the ones that were going to be more suitable for RPA, and then we sort of started working through them. So the one that you're seeing now is the first one that's been done within the finance operations area, but there are other initiatives going on throughout the business really in terms of using RPA and how we can use it to sort of make our processes more efficient and streamlined.
Fantastic, really good. Okay, so any other questions coming through on the chat? I'll just check. Dana, if you've seen any others.
No, I'm just seeing here Nina mentioned there's an issue RPA being properly integrated with systems. Workarounds may further complicate. Yeah, I agree with that. I think it depends on the limit. We've all got different finance systems, I guess. So it is just seeing how that goes. I know from our side of things, we've got an Integra test system as well, which we utilised intensely before any RPA went live. Because there is a concern that if it goes wrong when it's live, then the RPA team may pull their support and say, until you can confirm that your finance system is going to be able to correctly put in this data in the correct manner, then RPA wouldn't touch it. So we had to go to them as part of this case study that Paul mentioned to show them that our finance system could handle the RPA system as well. Hopefully that made sense. It made sense in my head.
No. It is. Thanks, Dan. Right, okay, gents, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for that, and I'd like you to take part in the Safe Paths discussion if you'd be interested. Please do fill in the form. It would be good to have a chat through some of this as well.
Definitely, Richard. Fantastic. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Have a good day.
Cheers. Thanks both.
Bye.
Okay, so I finished sort of a bit early, so give you back some time. We're always saving time with these efficient processes, so why wouldn't this event be any different? So we've got a break now. I'm going to go run to the shops and grab some lunch ahead of an early lunch today. So we've got Adam Pinder from Stockport